The Dallas Cowboys have added 4 running backs this offseason. How will that room shake out during the 2025 season? We'll break it down next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions, including, is Jalen Tolbert locked into the wide receiver 3 role? Are the Cowboys playoff contenders with George Pickens? But let's start with this question. It comes from one of our followers, longtime listener, Lord Dilly. He wants to know, how do you see the Cowboys running back room shaping out now that they've added 4 running backs? How many do they keep, including the fullback?
Well, obviously we're including the fullback. I mean, I think that wasn't really even in question.
No.
So let's just put that out of the way. I mean, I think as it stands right now, you're looking at the running back room, right? Like, I think that as it stands, they're probably going to go into OTAs, into mini camp, and see what they've got in these guys, see how they can kind of pair them together. I mean, obviously, all eyes at this point are on the rookies. What exactly do they have in these 2 guys? How much of a load are they capable of taking on? You know, like, that's really the question. Is, I think, Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams, these are pretty known quantities in the NFL. They've had a couple of years, especially Miles Sanders, obviously, right? He's been around for a while, veteran running back. You know what you've got there. You don't really need to kind of view that. Javonte Williams, I think, pretty clear evaluation on who he is as well. It's about finding out, what you have in Jadon Blue, what you've got in Phil Maffa. Are these 2 guys on their own talented enough, capable enough of potentially, being a running back duo unto themselves? Do you need to pair them with Javonte Williams? Do you need to forget the whole thing and then go out and get a street free agent running back and salvage this situation? These are all things that I think they're going to find out in these OTAs, but I would imagine that the bulk of the running back carries that you're going to see this season are probably already on this team.
Yeah. I think we got a report from Brian Broaddus a couple days ago that the Cowboys are done adding to the running back room right now. Now, that doesn't mean they couldn't go out and get somebody in August once training camp starts, or even during the season, Landon, because running backs become available. So, but I think he was saying, as of right now, the Cowboys want to go into the season or into the camp with the group that they have. Let's go backwards. Let's start with, I'm going to assume that they're going to keep 4 total backs on this roster, including a fullback, our guy Hunter Lipke. So that really means 3 running backs. I think that's probably a pretty safe assumption. I don't know if they're going to keep 4. That just seems like a little excessive at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that, the whole situation of keeping a running back, like, it means something different now. Like, because there's still a chance that even if, like, one of these 4 gets cut, they could end up on the practice squad, as you know what I'm saying. So I don't disagree with the idea that I think that it's not likely that you roster 4 running backs, but you may have a 4th running back kind of hanging around the team in some capacity, right?
But I think 3 is probably the magic number. So then you got to work backwards, right? We know that Jadon Blue is going to be on this roster, and I know that's maybe a wild assumption considering he's a 5th round pick, and 5th round picks aren't always guaranteed to make the roster, but he's just so unique compared to every other running back on the roster. I would be shocked if he isn't on it. And then it comes down to those other 2 spots, and competing for those spots are Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Phil Maffa, and we should mention Deuce Vaughn, who is on the roster. I mean, I would assume at least one of Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams makes the roster, but that other spot, I could see it being anybody. I could see it being Vaughn. I could see it being Maffa. I could see it being an outside free agent. I think the only thing we know for sure is that Jadon Blue and Hunter Lipke are the only locks to be on this roster.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing that we could probably say for pretty certain is that it's not going to be a bell cow situation. I mean,
No.
unless Jaden Blue comes in here and completely wows us, and on top of that, also put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle, maybe. I just don't imagine that this situation is going to suss out in a way where you're like, well, we got to give the lion's share or all the carries to this one particular player. So it will be a committee situation. I think what we have to suss out is how does the committee work, and I think you're right in suggesting that it's Jaden Blue in his role. And then what we were figuring out is where everybody else's role. Like, we know Blue is going to be the kind of speed receiving back, the change of pace guy, the juice back, right? As we've referred to them over time. The question is, how are you assembling the rest of the room? How are the rest of the carries being distributed? How are the rest of the roles that the running backs have to kind of fill out going to be distributed among the other, viable running backs? And like you mentioned, potentially any running backs that are on the street that they feel like maybe upgrades from the current situation.
Let me ask you about the two veterans, Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. If both of them reach their peak and whatever that is at this stage in their career, which of them has the higher ceiling in this Brian Schottenheimer offense?
I kind of, I mean, for where they are, right? I kind
of
feel
like not pre-draft, but like at this stage of their careers.
I kind of feel like it's Williams. I think, because if you could get something close to what you saw from Williams his rookie year, which wasn't that long ago, especially compared to Miles Sanders, I think that would be, first of all, it would pair extremely well with what you've got in Jaden Blue, right? I do think that if we're comparing all these running backs, the two running backs to me that are the most similar are Phil Maffa and Javonte Williams, right?
I would agree, yes.
I think those two guys are they're not exact identical twins or anything like that, but as far as if you were to put those two into a random running back room, you would probably be slotting those two guys for similar roles, right?
Correct.
Yes. And I think that, so I think if you got rookie level Javonte Williams that showed a little bit of promise, had some burst, was a big body running back to be sure, but also showed a little bit of better vision than what we've seen these last few years, showed a little bit more explosiveness. I think that would be he would be the one that would be the most kind of enticing if he were to actually able to kind of reinvigorate himself, find that ceiling again, and would be a great pairing, I think, with Blue as well.
Last thing before we move on, how do you want this running back room to play out? Like, if I could tell you, hey, everybody reaches the best case scenarios, we're in October, what does the running back room look like to you?
It's Maffa and Blue. I think. I mean, just because I think if you get the best of Maffa and you can tap into that potential with him, I think he has, I think Javonte Williams' rookie year plus ability, with if he is healthy completely and he hits that potential. If he doesn't, and if it comes in and this is all too much for him, I think Javonte Williams is a nice floor, but I fully expect and hope that Phil Maffa will come in and take that running back job from Javonte Williams, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm hoping it's just Blue getting 15, 16 touches and then just filling it in with Maffa, Javonte Williams. I think that's how you get this offense to be the most dynamic. We'll see. I wouldn't – go ahead.
I was going to say, I do think there's something – I am a little bit interested in seeing Miles Sanders in a running back 3 role. Just because I think, his balanced skill set, his ability to kind of do a little bit of everything would be valuable just to have as that third back that you can kind of rotate in on like a, every 4th series or something like that.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Jalen Tolbert. We actually talked about him on Tuesday's show and why he's a player that could be in for a big role in 2025. But is he locked into the wide receiver 3 role? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I love looking at the futures market over on FanDuel. You can bet on who you think is going to win the Eastern Conference Western Conference, and of course, the NBA Finals. I love looking at the series lines, even as the series get into game 5 and game 6. It's so much fun. Go over to FanDuel.com right now. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. And make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Every dayers, we will be back on Thursday talking about the Cowboys schedule. I don't care about the NFL schedule as much as everybody else does. Apparently, we know what teams they're playing. They're just going to tell us what dates they play. It's a mess. Anyways, be on the lookout for that show. We'll break it down. I do want to get to this question from Blue Sky. It's from Single LGT. He wants to know, do you think that Jalen Tolbert is now locked into the wide receiver 3 job, or do you think it'll be more of an open battle between him and Jonathan Mingo?
Can we just for a second talk about the fact that the George Pickens trade was, I don't know, was it a week and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know.
And it's now like the third most exciting story that's happening in Dallas sports media right now. It's pretty crazy.
Yep.
The week that Dallas sports media has had this last week. I was just thinking about that. But yes, I think that's a good question, right? Like it's, we got very excited about the Pickens trade, and we talked even before the Pickens trade about the opportunity to kind of properly slot some of these wide receivers into the roles that we feel like are more appropriate for their skill set, right? And I think that Tolbert fully has earned and is worthy of that wide receiver 3 spot. I think that's part of why I liked, the idea of them going out, be a part of it. Why I like the idea of them going out to get a wide receiver too. Having said that, I also think that they do have a couple other kind of unique players and we've discussed this before, is that I do feel like they have a well versed, well varietyed wide receiver room, and so I think that there is something to the idea that now that you've kind of slotted everyone down to their spots a little bit, wide receiver 4 and, I think in some cases wide receiver 3 could likely be a spot that's taken by Tolbert, but also kind of a rotational spot where you get to put players in that you want to see out there on the field catching passes. Whether that's obviously Turpin is the guy that kind of comes to mind immediately. It's a guy that you want to try to get the ball to in some special ways. He has obviously special speed. So I think, trying to find screens or having him run short routes or clear out routes where you get the ball with him on the move, that's stuff that they're going to want to try. They're going to obviously play some more tight end too a lot this year, I think, when they're running the football. And I think that is something that, when accounting for wide receiver 3, the number of snaps that the wide receiver 3 was getting last season, it may be down compared to last year because they may be playing more wide receiver 2. Tight end 2 situations. And then on top of that, obviously we talked about Lipke and some of the other, just, that 11th man on offense. I imagine now that you've got Pickens, I just feel like it's going to allow them to kind of open things up a little bit more to feel comfortable rotating in a bunch of different guys to kind of situationally create some interesting mismatches. And having said all that, I do think when you're doing that sort of thing, when you're trying to rotate in these kind of specialty players, it's nice to have a high floor, reliable guy who, can drop in and out of the lineup. And when it's his time to be out there, he can do the wide receiver things you need him to do at a high level. And I think that's where we finally have arrived with Tolbert, right? Is that he's finally a guy who can do a little bit of everything. Maybe he's not the best deep threat. Maybe he's not like a dynamic playmaker, but as far as going out there, running the routes correctly, blocking his butt off, doing the things you need him to do, I think he's pretty well secured that wide receiver 3 spot.
Totally agree. I think he's the best the best receiver on this team, obviously outside of CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. My question for you, though, is he the best fit with those two, right? And I think that's what's going to be really interesting is, do you think when you look at George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb and you try to think about, okay, ideally, what is the receiver that would work the best with those guys? Is it somebody that is a decent sized receiver, that's a good route runner, that's somewhat reliable? Or do you want somebody like Turpin, who's quicker than both those guys, that can do a lot of the stuff at behind the line of scrimmage? Or do you want somebody that's like a power slot, like Jonathan Mingo, that gives you size, athleticism? And I think that's what's so fascinating to me is Tolbert is that best receiver of that group. But there's a chance maybe he's not the best fit with them either.
Or, or it's matchup based, right?
I think that's probably what it's going to be. It's probably going to be more matchup based than anything.
I have to imagine that Tolbert is kind of your default wide receiver 3, but if you've got a matchup where, a power slot is going to be, I think power slot probably be CeeDee Lamb, but I think, if you have a situation where you want to attack horizontally across the field with a speed player, that you can throw Turpin in there, or you have a situation where you've got maybe an undersized cornerback room and you want to match up Mingo versus a smaller guy, right? I think that's the beauty of what you have in the room, is that you have the capability of deploying a variety of different players. I mean, even I don't know if he'll make the team, but if John Stevens Jr. was on the team, maybe you deploy him as your third wide receiver in a low red zone situation, right, where you're just trying to get taller, bigger, above the rim type players out there. So I think the Cowboys have a nice variety of guys to kind of sub in on a situational basis to create mismatches, and then on top of that, having a guy like Tolbert who, if you don't have a specific situation, you just want a competent guy out there who's going to be where he's supposed to be. Tolbert can provide that as well, but it's not. It's a champagne problem again. It's not that Tolbert isn't good enough to be wide receiver 3. It's that he is good enough to be wide receiver 3, but you also have these other guys that are kind of interesting, and you may want to feature in specific situations.
And maybe the answer will be whoever's the best playing on the outside, because we know that George Pickens is going to be an outside receiver. I would assume the Cowboys want to keep CeeDee Lamb in the slot as often as possible. And maybe Tolbert's a better player than Jonathan Mingo, but Mingo's the better outside receiver. We should mention there's another name that we haven't said at all yet, and that's Ryan Flournoy, who the Cowboys drafted in the later rounds of the 2024 draft. Actually started to play pretty well down the stretch. That's another freak athlete that maybe they want to get on the outside. Again, I'm going to just default to assume that it's going to be Jalen Tolbert taking over that role. But like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if it's matchup based. And all of a sudden there's a game where Jonathan Mingo is playing 31 snaps because he's just, hey, Joe Milton's in the game. We need a vertical receiver. There's Jonathan Mingo instead of Jalen Tolbert.
Well, listen, I mean, again, I hate talking about these situations, but injury, right? We talked all about the need for a guy like George Pickens in case something happens to CeeDee Lamb, but let's say something happens to CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens becomes your wide receiver 1 for a game or two. You still need competent receivers opposite of George Pickens. And the good news for the Cowboys is they still have that. They still have a guy who, I don't hate Jalen Tolbert having to play a wide receiver 2 for.
You just don't want that to be his full-time role.
Exactly. So that's the good news there, is that you have some decent depth now at the position, which is, great to hear.
Yeah, it's really nice when you feel excited about the 4th, 5th, 6th receivers on your team, rather than being like, oh man, I'm hoping one of these guys can be our wide receiver too. That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, let's continue to talk about the wide receivers and talk about George Pickens. Are the Dallas Cowboys playoff contenders now with Pickens on the roster? We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and the news never stops. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, we got a lot of different questions regarding George Pickens, but one of the ones that I love the most is someone wants to know, are the Cowboys a playoff contender with the addition of George Pickens? That question comes from John Kim. And then just a statement that I wanted to read to you. This one is from Supersonic Life. It feels like folks are way more optimistic about this team this year. Is that just because of the addition of George Pickens? It's crazy how one move can make you feel so much better. So my question to you, are the Cowboys a playoff team now with George Pickens?
Well, let's back up a little bit. First of all, the wide range of opinions here is crazy, right? Like, I do feel like, I will say this. I feel like people are starting to come around a little bit more on the Cowboys, and I feel like, yes, it does feel a little bit crazy that it is all about a trade, but that's the thing. It's not all about a trade. Like, I think if folks have been paying close attention to this team, I'll say since the Schottenheimer hire, there's been a pretty steady stream of some positive stuff that have come out, right? Like, the Cowboys have said things that they wanted to do. They've then followed through on those things, which, I mean, that's a change, frankly, from the last season.
Yes.
I think that they had what I would call, and I think what objectively has been referred to by people that do stupid draft grades. I hate them, but I don't hate seeing an A next to the Cowboys name, when I see people talk about it. I think that the Cowboys, since, the offseason has started, have had a pretty successful offseason. I think maybe they haven't spent the money that some folks wanted them to spend because they felt like spending money was some kind of recompense for what they did last year. But I think they spent money wisely and smartly, and they signed guys that the Cowboys needed. And then specifically with the draft, they filled the needs that they needed to, except for wide receiver. We all go, yeah, hey, we all like the draft, but what are they doing at wide receiver too? What are they doing at wide receiver too? And then they do something about wide receiver too. I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm having a hard time, coming up with reasons why this team isn't considered to be a little bit better of a contender than it was. I understand what happened last year, but I think context is important there. The injuries obviously mattered. But look around the league. Like, go find and count the number of teams that have like quality starters, or let's just say in-house solutions, right? For all 5 money spots, right? And the quarterback. Well, quarterback's included in that. Like, go look at all the other teams and the basis of the Cowboys are too deep at wide receiver now. They've got 2 good, maybe not healthy, but 2 quality corners, and then they just drafted a 3rd run, right? They've got multiple pass rushers if everything hits right, and even if everything doesn't hit right, you've got at least 2 really good pass rushers, right? 1 generational guy, a quarterback who's considered to be top 5 in the league. I think the Cowboys have a lot of things going for them that, gives them a very high floor season to season, which is why they're able to win 36 games, whatever, in 3 years. I think that they can be a playoff contender. Absolutely. We did an exercise. This is my last thing. We did an exercise on the NFL squad. I think it was a couple days ago, right? And it was all the NFL Locked On contributors power ranking the teams. I don't know if you actually if you filled out yours or not.
I did.
I really struggled after 5.
Yeah.
Right? Like, after teams 6 through 32, man, especially from 6 to let's say 15, all those teams are right there. Right. So, and the Cowboys are included in that group. So I think it's certainly possible that, in a top heavy league, the ball can bounce a weird way. That this team that has a lot of experienced veterans that have won a lot of football games before could bounce back and be in the playoffs again. Absolutely. Do I guarantee you winners or they win any playoff games? No, absolutely not. I need to see this team in the playoff do that. That's what we need to see. But as far as getting to the playoffs, they're pretty good at doing that.
Here's what I'll say. I think the Cowboys are a flawed team. They have injuries, including their starting quarterback, Dak Prescott. They're all pro corner in Trayvon Diggs. Their top linebacker in DeMarvion Overshown. I think the injuries are a little bit of a black cloud over this team right now, because if they were fully healthy, I think people would be a lot more excited about this version of the Cowboys going into the year. Having said that, 29 of the 32 teams in the league are pretty flawed as well. There's only a couple teams that are, have really good rosters at all of the key spots, and those are generally the teams that are in the Super Bowl every single year, right? So I think it's the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, and maybe another team, maybe the Lions or so, right? Everybody else has major problems.
flaws.
Right. And do I think the Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl or contend for a Super Bowl this year? No, I don't. But do I think they could be a 10-7 team and be back in the playoffs this year? Why not? I mean, they've got possible answers at all the major positions.
The amount of dissonance I experience when listening to a national media podcast talking, like when they go team to team, right? And they talk about the weaknesses and they're like, oh yeah, these guys are contenders, but they don't have a single pass rusher. Yeah. Oh yeah, these guys they're probably going to win their division, but I have no idea who their wide receiver one is. And then they come to the Cowboys and it's like, oh, the second pass catcher may be a problem. Oh, by the way, they just traded for Pickens.
Or hey, they don't have a great veteran defensive tackle behind.
Yeah, it's like,
again, I'm not disagreeing with that. That idea that they need help on defensive line.
Absolutely,
but we're talking about like easy fixable solutions or problems.
Backup problems, not starter problems. Like that's the thing is that they're talking about like there are other contender teams are talking about who is going to be their number one pass rusher. Who is going to be the pass catcher on this team? And the Cowboys are haggling over who's your secondary pass rusher, third pass rusher, who's your secondary pass catcher, who's a secondary nose tackle. What are we talking about here? I think the Cowboys' floor is pretty high. The question about playoffs and everything is always the same. We got to see them do it, but I believe they can get to the playoffs.
And if Dak plays 12 or more games, the Cowboys have not had a losing record. So like as long as Dak stays healthy, I've got to believe they're going to be hanging around the rim, to use a Jerry Jones term. All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.